Okay, so I just recently played at the Mesquite Regional with this deck, after taking it to a few locals, and I did pretty well with it. Like, I'm very happy with my performance. And I just want to go through, like, my specific card choices and stuff for you guys to give it, like, an overview of my list and, like, what I think worked and or maybe didn't work. So, for the tournaments I took it to before Mesquite, it was just 3 locals, and I went 2-1, 3-1, and 4-0. So all like pretty good turnouts. Like I didn't have any X2 drops or anything like that. And I went through a couple iterations. I think the list I took to the first 2 locals was this one, which did not have the promo laws. And then for the third locals where I went 4-0, the only change was I cut 3 cards to make room for the 3 promo laws. And those cuts were Otama, the 4th Otama, the 4th Queen, and the 3rd Blocker Law. Those 3 cards came out for the 3 promo laws. And honestly, I really like this card. I think, like, I didn't really need those copies of those cards, except the 4th Otama was nice, but I definitely didn't need a 3rd Law Blocker or a 4th Queen. And so this card felt very, very useful in a lot of my games, and I'm really happy that I put it in. It was definitely worth the inclusion. And I want to give like a rundown of my Mesquite matchups, and then that'll basically be the whole video. So my first round at Mesquite was against Red Green Luffy, which is obviously not like the most top tier deck, so the game was over pretty quickly. I just kind of hard countered everything he tried to do. It wasn't super close. He played a Zoro. I Gordon bottom decked it. Then he played a Cavendish. I Gordon bottom decked it. And then he played a Kid Killer to try to weaken my board, but I countered to save my attackers, and I was able to KO or to win the game the next turn. So it was a super quick game. It was over in like honestly like 10 minutes. Um, he had a surprisingly high amount of counter because on the lethal turn, I think he had like 1 life left and 6 cards in hand, and he was able to counter out all 6 cards. So I actually just barely got there that turn. Like if I had 1 less swing, he would have lived and maybe killed me next turn, maybe not. I don't remember if I had blockers or not. But it was honestly like surprising how much counter he had. And then my second match was against Perona. Um, it was pretty like a pretty standard game. That matchup was pretty straightforward. Usually, you just try to flood the board faster than they can rest your characters. And I was able to play around the 10-cost Dofi because I had 3 characters on the board plus my leader, so 4 targets for him to Dofi. So going into his 10-on turn, I knew I just had to save all of them so that he could only freeze 3 things and I would still get an extra swing the next turn. Or not extra, but like a swing he couldn't stop. And so I ended up countering out 5k counter power out of my hand just to save my 1 character so that he couldn't freeze all 3 of my things. I was able to use 5k counter power to save my 4th thing. And I was able to get the game the next turn. And then my third match was against the Law Mirror match, and I think he picked first, which I was surprised by because I thought going second was better. So I was happy to go second. But it first made sense once the game started because he played a Zoro Juro on his second turn, which I'm not playing. So if he had Zoro Juro, it makes sense why he wanted to go first, so he could play that on curve and try to ramp with it. I should have won, honestly, but I made a huge, giant misplay on my second to last turn. Basically, I had 5 Dawn available, so my intention was to play Kid for 5, cheat out a Bentham to get 2 active Dawn, and then attach those to my 2 to my 1 active character and my leader to swing 6 and 6 at his Kid and Killer. I would have gone 5-7, but he had a blocker, so I wanted to go 6 and 6 to make him block and give up a 2k instead of just countering 1k and then countering, basically I wanted to go 6-6, but I was tunnel visioned on the 6-6 so hard that I forgot to play the Kid Bentham first for the 5 Dawn, and I just attached one of my 5 Dawn to Ein and swung for 6, and then immediately was like, wait, I only have 4 Dawn left, I can't play Kid, I just threw the game in such a stupid way, and I scooped, and we even played it out as if I had made the correct play, and playing it out that way I won, like just to see what would happen. And it was my opponent's idea to play it out. I wasn't like, oh, please let me play it out, man. He was like, he said he wanted to play it out because the mirror stresses him out and he wanted to see which way it would have gone. But yeah, I definitely threw so hard for no good reason, which felt really bad. But I just had to like pick myself up and keep going, and, like move on. Oh, but boy, that felt bad. Um, yeah, my fourth match was against NL, and I just drew like super perfect. He starred me for a while, so on my four-don turn, instead of playing a guy that would just get KO'd by Gadatsu, I just didn't play a guy and swung 9k at his life, and he took it, obviously. I think he didn't see any triggers this game, which was amazing. And then on his 5-don turn, since I didn't play into Gadatsu, he just played a Shirahoshi blocker, which I obviously bottom decked. And then on his 7-don turn, he finally played a Gadatsu, meaning he couldn't play like a Russian L or anything like that. And then on his, I think on his, yeah, anyway, after he Higadatsu'd my Shachi on his 7-on turn, I played 3 bodies the next turn. Like, play a body, and then cheat out a body. And I left him at 2 life so that Yamato, even though Yamato was going to KO something, I didn't let him get the heal from it, so I didn't give him the extra card. So I left him at 2 life. And then after he played his Yamato to KO my... He KO'd my Bentham because that would have swung for 9, so I guess he saw that as a bigger threat than the kid. So he KO'd my Bentham, and then I started swinging next turn after I had like left him at 2 life for a turn, and he played his Yamato. After that is when I started going in, because I had, I think, 5 swings on board, plus a rush card, possibly. I had a lot of swings, so I started going in. And I want to say I played a second Captain Kid after he played his Yamato and left this kid alive. I played a second one, so I was just drowning in Dawn. So I had all the power in the world to like swing through his counter power. And I'm pretty sure I had 2 Kid Killers on my lethal turn, so I just drew like absolutely crazy. Yeah, it went very well. My 5th game was against Uta, and it was a pretty close game with a really crazy last turn. On his last turn, or like yeah, he had an 8-cost Kid and an Uta blocker and a Luffy blocker to protect it, and I managed to clear all 3 of those characters in one turn. Um, Yeah, it was crazy. So the way I did it was after he played the 8-cost kid, I was like, oh crap, I don't have a Gordon in hand. What am I gonna do? And of course I top deck Gordon the next turn, like perfect timing. Oh, I technically played 4 Gordon and 3 Raise Max, but they're the same card, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, I top decked Gordon right after he played the kid, which was crazy, and he was not happy to hear that after the game ended. He was like, did you already have the Gordon? I was like, no, I top decked it. He was so mad. But I played the Gordon, lowered the kid to 5k, and I think I swung 5k at it, 5k at it, 7k at it, 7k at it, which made him counter basically his whole hand and give up both of his blockers. Um, so he countered the 5, blocked the 7, and then for the second 7 he blocked with Luffy and countered 1k. So at that point his hand was 0 cards, and I had one more Otama. I had an Otama in hand. So the kid was at 5k. I played my Otama to lower it to 3k, bottom decked it, cheated out a kid and killer. I had 2 active Dawn at this point because I had 2 Captain Kids. So even though he was at 3 life and the kid and killer was at 5k power, the 2 active Dawns from my kids went on the kid killer, and I swung for 7k at his Luffy when he had no cards in hand. So he blocked with the Uta, I bottom decked the kid, and I swung at the Luffy when he had no cards in hand to completely clear his board. So he has no board, no cards in hand, and 3 life. And then on my next turn, since he basically had nothing, I was able to math him out. I swung 5 since he had no cards in hand, and he took it. He had like a card in hand, I think, but he didn't counter with it. So he took it and triggered, and I'm invincible to go to a 6k leader for the turn. But that guaranteed that I could math him out because I didn't have to play around a 2k counter in hand. I could just go 6, 8, 10 to win the game. My 6th, so I was 4-1 going into the lunch break, which felt really good. Unfortunately, my next 2 games were against Moria, which is like one of my worst matchups, which this is supposed to help with, which it kind of sort of did, but it was still really tough. So against the first Moria, he went first. I had to go second because he picked first, and I just got absolutely destroyed. Like, it was not close. His deck did everything it needed to do, and when that's the case, he's just gonna beat me because he swarms as fast as I can, but he removes more things than I can, and he's playing 9k bodies, so yeah, he killed me. It was brutal. And then after that, I played another Moria matchup, and this was actually super close. I chose to go first, and I swung 8k at his life turn 2 because I didn't have one of these guys to play. So I went first and swung 8k life to put him at 4. And then later on my last turn, he has 2 cards in hand and 2 life with a rested Moria leader. I mean, a rested Moria 9k body on the board, and so he has 2 cards, two cards in life, 2 cards in hand. So I'm trying to go for lethal this turn. I swung 7k at his life. So he has 2 cards in hand, meaning if he counters out of the 7k, he wait. I think he had 1 life at this point. Okay, he started at 2 life, but I got him down to 1, and then when he's at 2 cards in hand, 1 life, I swung 7k at life, and if he counters out, he has no cards in hand, meaning I can go 9k at his Moria character and bottom deck his Hogback character so that he can't possibly kill me next turn because he would have no characters on board, so only 1 swing, and I think I had 1 life. So he knows if he counters out, I'm going to kill his Moria character and probably win. So he takes the gamble of not countering out of that. So he has 2 cards in hand. He takes the life to go to 3 cards in hand, and my last swing is 9k at his leader, and he goes 2k, 2k, 1k. All 3 of his cards in hand with no life. He barely gets to 10k, because his last life had counter. So he took a huge risk, but I guess he had to, because if he didn't, I was gonna kill his Moria character and like seal the game for me, I think, probably. So if his last card had no counter, he was dead to my 9k swing. But because he had 2 2ks in hand before that. His last card was a 1k, so he was able to go 2k 2k 1k to live, and he killed me next turn. And I was very sad because it was super close, and I almost got it, but not quite. And then my next game was against Anel again, and this was definitely the craziest match of the whole day for me. He started me much longer than the previous Anel did, to the point where he played like a Godot. He played a 5 cost rush ace at 2 life and didn't swing with it. And then he played a Godotsu and didn't swing with that for a turn either. Yeah, he was just starving me a lot, and I didn't see Sanji, so I just had to like wait. I just had to wait it out. And then I had a weird play where I thought I made a misplay, but it ended up working out. I had 2 options. I could either go Gordon Reiju to bottom deck his Gidatsu, but I didn't see that for some reason. I was like focused on this queen in my hand, so I had 5 Dawn. So I could either go Gordon Reiju, which I didn't notice at the time, or I could play queen for 5, which is what I ended up doing. I played queen for all 5 of my Dawn, and Dawn minus to get the draw because I was digging for stuff, I guess. I was just digging for stuff. You know, when you're getting starved, you got to fill your hand back up. Unfortunately, I don't know why I didn't see the Gordon in my hand. I was like, oh, I can't bottom deck anything to Dawn minus for Reiju. I'll just play the Queen. Yeah, I just missed the Gordon. So I played the Queen. But because I Dawn minus with the Queen, that meant next turn I was able, and I think I ended up still cheating something out, but that meant next turn I was in Shachi range. So if I had gone Reiju instead of Queen, I would have been at 4 Dawn for the Shachi instead of 3, and I wouldn't have got the ramp too. So that part actually kind of ended up working out, that the Queen put me in range for Shachi. That was like a side effect that I hadn't planned on, but it ended up working out. And since yeah, I Dawn minus that turn, but I didn't bottom deck anything, meaning I still had that Gordon in hand, and the Queen drew me a second Gordon. So on my next Gordon, on my next turn, I used both of those Gordons to lower the Yamato he played to 3k, so I could bottom deck the Yamato and cheat out a Shachi and get the 2 Dawn from the Shachi. So that ended up working out pretty well. The fact that I didn't use the Gordon on the Gadatsu, and I used Queen to Dawn minus, meant I was able to Dawn minus double Gordon in the Yamato and play out a Shachi to get 2 ramp. So what I thought was a misplay of not playing the Reiju Gordon turn ended up actually being put, I think, better. Like, I think it was better that I did that because it cleared the Yamato, and I was able to just get rid of the Gadatsu on a later turn by swinging at it, which obviously can't kill a Yamato by swinging at it in this deck. It's just way too high power for that. But I was able to kill the Gadatsu by Otamaing it down to 4 and swinging 5k at it, and he let it die because he didn't want to give me a 2k. Yeah. On his next turn, he swung 5k with his leader and 7k with ace at one of my bodies, and I countered out of both swings, so like a 1k and a 2k and a 1k, because I really needed. What did I do? Oh yeah, I really just wanted to like counter out of the swings I could counter out of. And then he had a second Yamato that he swung at the 5k body, so of course it died. And then he swung at life, so I took it. something like this. Yeah, it was a lot. Basically, he was like trying to thin my board, but I was saving as much as I could to counter out of it. And then on his 10 Dawn turn, he's at 1 life. He plays a Hiyori to take his life and put something there, and then plays a Katakuri to put the Hiyori on top. So he goes back to 2 life, and he stacked his bottom life for like the perfect trigger. And I was like, wow, I thought I was gonna win, and now I'm probably not because that was a crazy setup to make me push through. And then my next turn was just absolutely crazy. So after he played before his 10 Dawn turn, I had played a Bentham on 7 Dawn, which put me at 8, and then I played another Bentham with those remaining 4 Dawn, which gave me a ninth Dawn, and that ninth Dawn was the one that I used to play Otama to lower his Gadatsu to 4K and kill it. So going into my turn after he played the Katakuri, he still had a Yamato on board, and I had 2 Benthams on board, so these were able to swing for 9K. And so what I ended up doing was I swung out. I swung with a 5K law just to like see what he had. He gave me a 1K. Then I swung 7K with my leader, and he took that, adding the face up Hiyori to his life. So now he has 2 cards in hand, and I know one's a Hiyori 2K, and I don't know what the other one is. Um, and then I played a Rush Zoro, put 2 Dons on it. So I swung 7 at his life, and he took it. He took the face down life he stacked there with Hiyori. He took that, triggered a disappear. So this was his triggers this game were Anami earlier to pop one of my attackers, and a disappears to put him back at 2 life, and then he just triggered a second disappears that he stacked there with Hiyori. So he's done 3 triggers this game, and 2 of them were life heals. So on his when he goes to 0 life, he triggers the disappears, discards a card to go to 1 life, and then he used a Nell to discard his second card and go to a second life. So he has no cards in hand, but he has 2 life, meaning I have to connect 3 more swings. And thankfully, since I have these Benthams on board, I know they're going to go through because he has no cards in hand and they're swinging for 9K. And I swing with both of the Benthams. So he goes, take it, no trigger, no trigger. And I cheat out a Kid and Killer left with 1 Dawn left active. I cheat out a Kid and Killer to swing 8K at his life. So his only out here is 2 2Ks off of those 2 random life he got, and they ended up being bricks. It was like a Katakuri and an Amaru, I think, but he couldn't trigger the Amaru because he didn't have 2 cards in hand to discard for it. So the Kid and Killer went through, and it was awesome. And I didn't go 8-9-9 with playing this first. I went 9-9-8 because if his bottom life was a Beji or an Onami, that would have lost me the game because it would have popped my third attacker. So I made sure to swing at the 2 attackers I had first, and then play the rush character after that to play around Beji and Onami triggers because I figured it was more likely that he had a Beji or Onami on the bottom life than it was that those 2 life would both be 2Ks. So I played around the triggers rather than playing around the off chance that he gets 2 2Ks, and it paid off because he ended up having neither. So that was a crazy turn. And my whole Airbnb group was actually watching that. Like the last couple turns of that game, they were standing like off to the side a few feet away watching it. And I even heard one of them say after my no opponent disappeared triggered to heal back to 2 life, he was like, "Oh, he has 2 life. Seth's gonna lose this game." And I heard him say that, and I told him that afterward, and he was like, "Oh crap, I guess I was being too loud." But when I went 9-9 and then 8 with the King Killer and won the game, they all like lost their minds because they were trying to keep so quiet to not like distract the game or anything. And then as soon as it was over, they all flipped out and like started cheering. And that was definitely the highlight of my day. That made me very happy. It was just cool to see my friends like watching me and like watch me win this super close game. From like a seemingly unwinnable position. It was just a good time. That was definitely the highlight of my weekend. And then my ninth match of the day was another Moria, and I picked to go first again. And this one wasn't as close as the previous Moria game because he was just like hurting for resources the whole time. I think when I killed him, I still had 2 life left and an extra Kid and Killer in my hand that I didn't even have to use. So I was like pretty far ahead when I finally killed him. And it was so bad for him because not only did he not get to play an 8 cost Moria the whole game, like I guess he just never drew one or never had a good opportunity to play it, he also didn't activate his leader ability the entire game because he just had no targets for it. He kept having, I think, like, yeah, I think he just straight up had no thriller Bart cards to cheat out. Like, it was tough. He had to, like, manually, like, play Hina, play Suru, play Lucci from hand to like get 2 kills, and then later he did that again. He went like I think Rebecca Helmeppo something Lucci to get another double kill. So he was able to like get 2 Lucci double kills, but his hand was just empty for the most part after that because he had it was like not giving him the value that a Moria deck should be giving you when you get to cheat out characters for like less Dawn than they should be. He just wasn't getting to do that. So he didn't get to use his leader ability the whole game, and he didn't get to play an 8-cost Moria the whole game. Uh, which, like, lucky for me, he kind of sort of bricked. Like, he didn't technically brick because he had plays and he was, like, fighting my board. It just wasn't enough to keep up with me, like, spamming bodies and swinging 5k, 5k, 7k, 7k. And so I got that game. And I do think, like, after my experience, I think you definitely want to go first in the Moria matchup just to take their going first curve away from them. I've heard some people say you want to go second, but the one game where I got second, I was absolutely demolished. And then the 2 games where I went first, I either won the game or almost won the game. So I think Law just really wants to go first in that matchup. And if Law goes second, like, it's cooked. Like, you just don't have much of a chance because they're just going to have the optimal curve and like also get to swing at you first, meaning they're applying pressure before you are. I just don't like it. I think going first is a lot better in that matchup. And for my final match of the day, it was against Uta, so my second Uta of the day. And he played an 8-cost kid and I was out of Gordon's this time. And I didn't top deck a Gordon right after he played the kid like I did the first time. I just didn't have a Gordon. So I had to play an awkward turn where I think I just went like 5 Dawn on Reiju, swing 10k at Kid. He had to block. And then I went 11 or 6k, 6 Dawn on my leader, 11k at the Kid. And he had to block that too. So that tells me he doesn't even have a 2k and a 1k in his hand to like counter out of the 10k swing. So I know his hand just has like very little counter in it because he had to give up a blocker instead of just countering 3k. But thankfully, I was able to get rid of those 2 blockers. And I think I cheated out of Bentham after that to get a Dawn, and then I would go back to 10 Dawn on my next turn. Um, so, like, I was at least, like, applying pressure to the kid. It wasn't just sitting there, like, impenetrable fortress or anything. I was able to go 10k, 11k, and force out 2 blockers. Um, and I had a feeling he had like very little counter in hand because he blocked instead of countering. And so he does like a very simple turn. He just like does a couple swings and whatever. And then on my next turn, now is when I top deck the Gordon. So then I'm able to lower his kid to 5k. And I swung at it with a 5k, a 7k, and a 7k to finally kill the kid, which left him at 1 life and 2 cards in hand by the time the kid died. So that tells me like at least his 2 cards in hand were not a 2k and a 1k. Otherwise, he would have saved the kid, but it died. So his 2 cards in hand are like at most 2k power counter, 2k counter power, and he has 1 life left. And I have 2 swings left, so I'm able to go 7k with my leader. And then he took it, triggered the I'm Invincible. So both of my Uta opponents ended up triggering the I'm Invincible at the regional, which like I think just means like you're already dead. Like if you have to trigger that card, you're not in a good spot because that's your win con. But both of them ended up having to trigger it. And so he takes the 7k, triggers the Invincible, and I go cheat out a Kid and Killer, go 9k at life, and his last 2 cards in hand were 2 9-cost Zoros, so no counter power. And he just never had a good chance to play those 9-cost Zoros because I was just applying too much pressure the whole time. If he just plays 9 Dawn to pass his turn, like I'm just gonna kill him. Or even worse, I'll double Gordon the Zoro and like nullify his entire previous turn. Oops. Yeah, and so that was a pretty close game. Like that top deck Gordon on the final turn saved me. And it's good that I was able to like thin out his hand or thin out his blockers a little bit on the turn before that by just putting all my Dawn on my Reiju and my leader and attacking the kid. So that's basically my tournament report. I hope y'all found that interesting. I'm definitely a really big fan of this list. I feel like the ratios are really good. Obviously, going into OP07, we're gonna stop playing the Sanji 2K and start playing the other the new Sanji 2K that has blocker. I don't know what else I'm gonna cut for it. Maybe a Shiraya since that's like a 3-cost blocker, the same as the Sanji. Like I'll probably cut these 2 cards and maybe 2 Shirayas or like an Otama and a Shiraya for the new Sanji blocker, and the rest of the list will probably stay the same. Because I am a big fan of these ratios. I like the promo laws. I like having 6 rush cards. 7 Gordon slash Raise Max. So yeah, I'll just go ahead and make it right now. OP07 RP Law. I'll show you all the lists that I'll be starting out with. we get the... Surprisingly, this new Sanji's not a Germa 66 card, but I guess, like, within the context of the show, that kind of makes sense. I won't say more than that. It's just weird. Like, it feels like it should be a Germa 66 card so that the Rage deck can search it, but it just isn't. Yeah, like this one's German Country. This one's just straight up Straw Hat Crew. So what we're doing is we're probably, like, definitely playing 4 of these and probably cutting these 2 Sanjis and either a Shachi and an Otama, or, I mean, a Shiraya and an Otama, or maybe just even 2 Shirayas. It depends on, like, if you want that 3rd Shiraya to, like, have a extra chance of seeing it in the Black-Yellow Luffy matchup and stuff like that. Nothing else feels super cuttable. I guess I could cut one of these instead of an Otama because they have the same effect, and this one's just a 2k. But this one's also a 2k, so I feel like if I'm picking between these two, I'm probably going to cut the Otama, to be honest. So I end up cutting 3 2ks and a 1k for 4 2ks. I'm going to try out this list first and see how it goes. Yeah. And if I don't like it, maybe I'll cut a Shiraya, or one of the promo laws instead of the Otama. Hope y'all enjoyed my video, and I'll see you in the next one.